for coming to the first annual State of La Jolla address. My name is Steve Haskins and I'm the president of the La Jolla Town Council. We believe that bringing together various groups and civic organizations in La Jolla at the same time and at the same place provides a great opportunity for all La Jollans to get to know who these groups are, what they do, and whether you want to be involved with one or more of them. We do have quite a few groups in La Jolla. Tonight's event is the first in a series of events like this that will go on throughout this year. Tonight is focused on organizations that deal with land use and governmental matters. The next event, the State of La Jolla, will be for arts and culture. Museums, historical society, and other groups will attend that and all together and give presentations in the same way that you'll see the speakers giving presentations this evening. We'll also have one for clubs and charitable organizations like the Women's Club, Lions, and Kiwanis. And there will also be one for churches and religious organizations later on in the year. So we expect that this will be a coming together of a lot of different groups that do different things, all volunteers, all people who give their time for free for what they believe to be the betterment of our community, La Jolla. Our first speaker is someone you probably all know. He's been a fixture in our community as a leader of various committees and organizations and is here tonight as president of the La Jolla Community Planning Association. Please give a warm welcome to LaCava.
Steve, thank you for that introduction. And thanks to the La Jolla Town Council for hosting what I hope, as you said, Steve, will become an annual event. Recognizing that I'm the first speaker, I'm going to set the bar really low so all the subsequent speakers can really wow the crowd. So I did put together a presentation, and we got someone going there. I am going to talk about the La Jolla Community Planning Association, which is the more regulatory of the bodies that you will be hearing tonight. And I thought because we're different organizations with different functions, that I would talk a little bit about what is the function of the La Jolla Planning Group, so you can distinguish it from what the other groups do and what their mission is and what they've accomplished. So if we can start. Functionally, for those of you that might be live tweeting this event, hashtag LJCPA, or my favorite, hashtag CPGs work. So those of you who follow me on Twitter have seen that quite a bit, so let's get started. Functionally, the La Jolla Community Planning Association is a community planning group, which is a recognized organization in the city of San Diego, and La Jolla is one of 42 that covers, as you can see, every corner of our city, and they're officially recognized. Next. The primary function of the planning groups is to implement the community plan, hence the name. The La Jolla Community Plan was approved in 2004, and it covers everything you would expect in a complete community. Residential and commercial land uses, public facilities, parks and beaches, mobility, how we get around, historical preservation, economic development. And so that's the primary guide for the planning group. Next. But we also deal with a more important but somewhat boring aspect of zoning, and I just want to touch on this. La Jolla has 3 levels of zoning. It has the La Jolla Plan District, which covers the village and the commercial areas of Nautilus and Bird Rock. It has the La Jolla Shores Plan District, which covers La Jolla Shores, the residential and the commercial. And then the rest of La Jolla, the residential portions of La Jolla, are covered by the same citywide generic zoning that exists throughout. So whether in San Isidro or Rancho Bernardo or in La Jolla, the residential zoning is exactly the same. And I'm going to come back to that towards the end of my talk. So next. The basic scope of what we do, unlike some of the other organizations, is we're primarily reactive. Our job is to respond to requests from the city of San Diego. And these things happen literally every day. Private development proposals are submitted. The city is doing new policy or zoning or master plans. They're developing new infrastructure, and they're looking for the community input on those items. That's about 85 or 90% of what we do. We also are proactive. Occasionally an issue will bubble up that affects an entire neighborhood or the community at large, and we'll go into kind of a more proactive mode, set up meetings, trying to find out what the issues are, what the real problems are, and potential solutions. Next. 2014 was an important role for planning groups citywide, which of course includes La Jolla. And through my work as I'm also chair of the Community Planners Committee, which is the umbrella organization. We did a number of important things. The one I'm most proud of is the neighborhood input on infrastructure priorities, which in 2012 was the very first time the city of San Diego ever asked for individual communities to communicate with City Hall about what their priorities were. And we did that first in 2012, where I kind of created the framework, and it was so successful the city actually made that a city council policy. So we knew that every year the city would be coming out to the individual neighborhoods asking for priorities. And I'm going to talk faster because otherwise I'm running out of time. But in 2014, the city council further cemented that by making it part of their budget policies. This year also, for the first time, we got a reimbursement in the city budget for planning groups, because they're really doing the work of the city, and so they're eligible for reimbursement of their expenses. Planning groups also can't really do much in the way of fundraisers like other organizations. And then last, the city policy that actually empowers us as a planning group was updated this year, and we clarified that all parts of the community plan is under our jurisdiction, not just land use. Community plan, community planning groups, kind of makes sense. Next. So let's focus a little more about the La Jolla Planning Group. Besides myself, I have a great executive team, and some of them are in the audience. Special shout out to Helen Boyden, who does an amazing job as secretary. And then of course the other trustees, I'm sure you'll recognize a few names up there. They're all volunteers, they represent a variety of neighborhoods in La Jolla and bring a variety of viewpoints to our discussions. Attendance-wise, we had a pretty good turnout last year. We averaged about 70 in attendance. We never dipped below 50, and we had one big meeting where we had nearly 120 people show up. And there's often a criticism citywide about planning groups that it's just the same people showing up all the time. But I actually tracked it, and we had over 300 different people show up at our meetings because of the diversity of the issues that we address. Next. A little more into the numbers. We reviewed 76 projects last year over the course of the 12 months. That's a little bit on the low side. The CPA typically is over 100. So activity is a little bit quiet in La Jolla. We recommended approval of 83% of them. That's actually a little bit on the low side as well. We're typically in the 85 to 90% approval rate. I mentioned the consent agenda. I know the town council uses the consent agenda process as well. It's an opportunity to take the recommendations from the joint committees and boards and drill down a little bit deeper. We did pull about 30% of them for a deeper discussion at the CPA. And in 2014, we only appealed one city decision. That also is unusual for us. We usually are down there 3 or 4 times disagreeing with decisions on projects. Let's talk about the hot button issues here for the CPA. First one that made the media quite a bit was the March elections. Quite a bit of controversy about that. It took us nearly the course of the entire year to resolve that. The city's happy, which is the primary group that I look to for approval, although a couple of folks are still upset about that. Short-term vacation rentals was also a hot button issue for us this year, and I know the town council had a presentation. That's a really difficult one that we need to address. It's going to be difficult to resolve. You know, you have the rental business, which is arguably an important part of our local economy now. But if you are a single-family homeowner that lives next to a rental that is poorly managed or is constantly having parties, you can care less about the local economy. You're just concerned about the quality of life in your single-family neighborhood. So that's something we really need to focus on. We came up with some modest recommendations, and I've initiated some conversations with the city of San Diego about how to attack that. The other one that was actually a little bit of a surprise was a wireless antenna proposal at Cliff Ridge Park. If you're not familiar with Cliff Ridge Park, it is located next to the YMCA and next to Torrey Pines Elementary. And I said surprising because there's actually 2 antennas there now and a permit for a 3rd one, so you would think this 4th one would kind of go in quietly. But it didn't, not by a long shot. That was one of our big, well-attended meetings. The issue, I think, is partly as a new generation of parents at Torrey Pines Elementary who are concerned about the proximity of the antenna to their elementary school. And there's also been some new issues raised about the appropriateness of commercial leasing in our public parks. So that's something that the city of San Diego is looking into. There was a recent court case that they haven't quite evaluated the impact on that. And then I threw on there Fay Avenue Alzheimer's facility. That wasn't really a hot button. We had a pretty healthy discussion about that. We opposed that project, it did get approval down at the City of San Diego. And I mention that because what often doesn't get discussed is a number of times that the applicants come in with one project, spend quite a bit of time working with the neighbors or working with the planning group to refashion their project into something that can be mutually acceptable. And that actually happens more times than you would imagine. And the Fay Avenue project is certainly one. After they had their approval already, they came back, they made some changes. CPA found that to be favorable Monday night of our last meeting, but it's a good example of how we can all kind of work together. I mentioned infrastructure earlier. In 2013, we did submit our recommendations from La Jolla down to the city. We came up with about 20 projects. These were the top 10 for us, and you can see that the city has really responded. They're either funded or partially funded, or they're in design, or they've started construction. La Jolla is lucky with some very generous donations, and so some of these are being privately funded. But we are getting good, this whole public infrastructure and this neighborhood input is really working, in my view. The bottom 20 has really had almost no response. So we still keep them on the list. We're going to keep pushing down at City Hall because they're all important projects for La Jolla, our quality of life for our merchants and for our residents. Next. I threw this one in because, you know, we always talk about there's some house under remodel. This is not 2014 building permits. This is actually building permits over the past few years. So it makes you wonder if there's any house left in La Jolla that has not had some kind of remodel. No other community has this kind of density of building permits that have been pulled. So let me kind of start to wrap up here about 2015. We're going to continue to do the work that we do, which is, you know, serving the community, working with the applicants, and communicating with City Hall. One of the goals that we talked about Monday night that we're going to try to do is make the La Jolla Shores zoning more predictable for everyone. That's, the past few years, that's where we've had a lot of struggle because of the way the La Jolla Plan District Ordinance is written about what does it mean, what does it not mean. So we're going to try to see if we can come up with language that makes it more predictable for everyone. I talked earlier about how our residential zoning is generic zoning, it's citywide zoning. And that doesn't seem right. We should make zoning in La Jolla zoning. So we've talked with the city about trying to incorporate elements of the community plan into zoning for La Jolla to capture the unique characteristics of our community. We are not any other neighborhood in the city of San Diego. So that's something we're going to try to do. The next one is some mantra that I've been adopted for the past few years: less regulation, more enforcement. I would say easily 80% of the phone calls I get in La Jolla, and even phone calls I get on citywide issues, it is not so much about permitting or the regulations, it's about the lack of enforcement. We have a good set of rules in our municipal code. What we really need is the enforcement. And we don't have adequate staffing down in the code enforcement section of the city or even our San Diego Police Department. And so what we have a tendency when there are problems, let's just add more regulations. That doesn't help us. We need to get that enforcement. As I talked earlier, the short-term vacation rentals is something we're going to try to address. It is an issue in Pacific Beach and Ocean Beach. And so we're going to, I think, work with those other communities to try to push something through. And then, of course, the issue we have in La Jolla is we have citywide, which is the lack of funding for infrastructure. Again, we're lucky with the private donations, but we've got to get more public funds. And then my feeling has always been, together we are stronger. The more that we can speak as one voice in La Jolla, the more we're going to get accomplished down at City Hall. And so we certainly welcome you. I'm very aggressive about keeping my website or the CPA's website up to date with our minutes and agenda so you know what's going on. Come out and participate. We're always welcoming new members. We're trying to get our membership up. We don't charge a fee. You just have to show to one meeting and fill out an application. So with that, I'll wrap up. And there's my contact information. I did pass out a copy of that, so if you have any questions, just give me a holler. With that, I'll conclude.